An ordinary accountant, a luxury island resort, and a surprise run-in with his ex-con classmate. This was supposed to be a routine seminar. But one wild night, a school teacher's respectable wife is drawn into a strip card game that spirals completely out of control. By sunrise, boundaries are shattered on a nude beach, and her husband, desperate and humiliated, asks strangers to fix his marriage, no matter the cost. What follows is a scandalous lottery that puts her body, their marriage, and everything they thought they knew on the line. This is no fiction. It's a true confession that will make you question everything you believe about love, loyalty, and what happens behind closed doors.
My name's Albert Breen. I'm 34, work for myself as an accountant, and for the most part, I'd say I'm a pretty regular Scandinavian guy. When I showed up at this fancy, 2-day tax seminar held at a nice conference center, I was honestly surprised to spot my old buddy from school, Fabian Holm, in the crowd. Last I'd heard, there'd been rumors about Fabian spending a bit of time behind bars. But we went way back, so we sat next to each other, and pretty quickly decided we'd grab a few drinks after dinner and catch up on old times. At one particularly dull moment during the seminar, Fabian slid a Christmas card across to me. After the usual holiday wishes, there was a handwritten note that simply said, "Read it." Here's what the card said. Dear Fabian, Vera and I are celebrating 5 wonderful years since we renewed our marriage vows, and we want to thank you again for what you did for us. I've lost track of Anders, so if you ever see him, please thank him for me as well. You two honestly saved my marriage and made me the happiest man alive. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Your friend, Nick. Fabian explained that Nick sent him a card like that every single year, and there was a wild story behind those words. He promised he'd tell me all about it later at the bar, and he kept that promise. Here's how his story went. So, I'm Fabian Holm, and back in my small Scandinavian hometown, most folks thought of me as a bit of a troublemaker. I wasn't exactly popular, probably because I'd run 2 businesses into the ground, costing some decent people a good chunk of change. I'd racked up debts and spent a short stint in jail, just a month, and only for drunk driving, but that label stuck, and nobody wanted to hire someone with my reputation. Things started to turn around when I ran into Anders, an old friend from my childhood. Anders was caught up in some pretty shady business deals, the sort where you need someone to be the official fall guy when a company gets cleaned out. Most of the big players usually pick some poor soul who drank too much, but Anders said he wanted someone who could handle things better. At that point, I really didn't have much left to lose, so I agreed. Anders said he'd train me for the role, and to start things off, he booked 2 tickets for a week-long charter trip to Fuerteventura, one of the Canary Islands, not far off the coast of Morocco. We got ourselves an apartment at a nice hotel just south of a little town called Coralejo. There wasn't a whole lot happening nightlife-wise, but that suited Anders just fine. He wanted me to focus on learning the ropes. For the first 2 days, we worked pretty hard, just taking short breaks to grab food. Then, on the 3rd day, everything took an unexpected turn. We got new neighbors. Our new neighbors were a Scandinavian couple in their mid-40s. The wife, Vera, definitely turned heads. She was attractive, carried herself well, and had this confident way of moving. But the way she talked to her husband was downright sharp at times, and Anders actually felt a little bad for the poor guy. Goes to show, nobody's all good or all bad, not even Anders, who was no stranger to trouble. Then Anders leaned over to me and said, "That woman just needs someone to set her straight." I laughed and asked, "Yeah, but who's going to do that?" He shot back, "Us, obviously. I actually think it's our responsibility." I told him, "Come on, you're dreaming. We can't just do something like that." He just grinned and said, "Fabian, you need to realize that if a man really puts his mind to something, he can make it happen. Remember that. This situation is a great lesson." We headed down to the pool, where the couple, Vera and her husband, Nicholas, everyone called him Nick, were already sitting. Anders introduced us and called the bartender over for drinks. As we chatted, we learned they were both teachers from the capital. Out of the blue, Anders told them we were planning a trip around the island the next day and invited them along, even though we had no car or plans. Back in our room, I pointed that out, and Anders just laughed. He said, "Don't worry about it. These little problems are nothing." It really was no big deal. That evening, we went into town for dinner, and Anders arranged for a taxi to take us around the island the following day. The next morning, our driver, Jose, showed up at the hotel right on time with his Mercedes. Since Nick had done some reading about the island, Anders had him sit up front, with Vera behind him, me in the middle, and Anders behind the driver. The island's not huge, about 100 kilometers long and 30 wide, so Jose suggested we take the mountain road south, and Nick agreed. Jose was a fantastic guide, stopping at old churches and historic sites that Nick loved to photograph. At one point, while we were at an old governor's house dating back to the days of Columbus, Jose told us this wild story about how Columbus apparently had an affair with the governor's wife. When the governor complained, Columbus and the wife accused him of treason, and the poor guy ended up losing his head, literally. Nick joked that things probably would have turned out better for the people in America if Columbus had been the one to get the chop instead of the governor. Vera chimed in, saying maybe it was a lesson for husbands who never know what's best for their wives, and everyone had a good laugh. Jose took us to a cozy bar for some coffee and brandy, and then we had lunch at a restaurant on the island's highest mountain. Anders covered the bill for everyone. When Nick tried to pay, Vera shot him a look, and he gave up. She'd had plenty of the free wine at lunch, and after we hit the road again, Anders sat next to her and made conversation, even drawing Nick into it. Even though Vera was wearing a short skirt, Anders kept it respectful. Later, when we stopped at a church known for its spice shop, Anders bought her some saffron, a pricey treat. She thanked him with a big hug and a kiss. Jose made a funny comment about the spice, and we all cracked up. Anders didn't make any moves or act inappropriately with Vera, not during the rest of the stops or in the car on the way back up the coast. Back at the hotel, Anders invited Vera and Nick to have dinner with us. He picked up the tab again, and with the good wine flowing, Vera was in high spirits. She and Nick agreed to join us in our room afterward for drinks and a chat. After a strong whiskey and some wild stories about parties, Anders mentioned a business trip he'd taken to Nice, France. He told Vera about a night when he and his secretary ended up at their French host's place, and someone suggested swimming in the pool, without bathing suits. When his secretary refused, the host got her to play a simple card game. She won some money, lost her clothes, and finally joined everyone in the pool. Anders made sure to add that no one made her uncomfortable, and everyone just had fun. I could see Vera was intrigued by the idea of a game where you could win money and not risk losing much. When Anders asked if she wanted to try, she didn't say no. Anders said, "We can't exactly go swimming here, but you know there's that big sand area by the ocean where lots of German tourists sunbathe nude. How about we do the same after breakfast tomorrow? Or, if you're feeling shy, we could just play the game right now." I backed him up and said it sounded like fun. Nick seemed up for it too. Vera stayed quiet until Anders brought out a deck of cards and laid down a pile of 50 and €100 notes. Finally, she said, without even checking with Nick, "Doesn't hurt to try a fun game, let's hear the rules." Anders checked with Nick, who gave the green light, and then explained the simple rules. Vera had to pick 5 cards from the deck, all face down, and flip them over one at a time, leaving a few minutes between each. If she drew a red card, she'd remove one item of clothing. For every black card from 2 to 10, she'd win €50, and for black face cards or aces, she'd pocket €100. With a little luck, she could walk away with as much as €500, which is around $600 in the States. Anders spread the deck of cards out on the table, letting Vera pick 5 cards and set them aside. He collected the rest, then told her to turn over her first card. It turned out to be the King of Clubs, and Anders handed her a crisp €100 bill, which made her eyes light up. A few minutes later, she flipped the next card, a 5 of hearts, which meant she had to forfeit her skirt. The third card, the 7 of hearts, cost her the top she was wearing. After that, the King of Diamonds meant she had to remove her bra. We paused for some whiskey and shared some laughs, then she revealed the last card, the 2 of clubs, which earned her another €50. Vera gave Anders a big hug and suggested they play another round. Anders agreed, with the friendly condition that if she lost her panties, the game would be finished. Vera picked out another 5 cards, turning over the first to find the 8 of clubs, another €50. But the next card, the Queen of Diamonds, meant it was time for the last piece of her outfit to come off. Rather than being embarrassed, Vera seemed a little energized by the playful mood. Giggling, she turned to Anders and asked, "So, about that young secretary, what happened after she ended up joining you in the pool?" Anders replied, "Well, the number 1 rule in my line of work is to always show respect to female colleagues. We had a fun time swimming, but after that, we all just went back to the hotel for a nightcap. That's when she opened up to me about her marriage troubles and asked for some advice. Her husband seemed to have lost interest in their relationship, and she wanted to change that. I tried to help, and about a month later, she sent me a kind note, thanking me for saving her marriage." Vera pressed, "But what did you actually do for her?" Anders just grinned and said, "A true gentleman never tells." Vera hugged Anders again, and it was clear everyone was enjoying the joke, including Nick, who didn't seem to mind at all. The next morning, after a big breakfast, we packed a bag with some snacks and a few beers and made our way to the local beach where nudity was pretty common. Just south of Coralejo, there's a big area of sand dunes, shaped by the warm Sirocco winds blowing from the Sahara. Among the dunes and bushes, people had built wind shelters out of black lava stones, about half a meter high. Finding an empty spot wasn't easy, so Anders approached the folks at the largest shelter within a reasonable distance from the others. With a few euros and a little friendly negotiation, an older German couple happily gave us their place, waving and inviting us to meet them again tomorrow. Like we'd planned earlier, I offered to take a walk to the water with anyone who wanted to go, about 50 meters away behind a dune. As expected, Vera sent Nick with me. When we returned after about 20 minutes, we found Anders and Vera relaxing, having applied sunscreen all over to protect themselves from the strong island sun. Vera helped Nick and me apply some as well, making sure we didn't burn, and we all shared a laugh at her playful manner. Around noon, we wrapped up sunbathing and got back to work on the business plan, spending the time between lunch and dinner focused on our project. Anders headed into town for some shopping, and that evening, he invited Vera and Nick out to dinner at a nice local restaurant. The hotel receptionist had even reserved a table for us. At dinner, I noticed Vera didn't give Nick her usual reminders about not drinking too much, and instead, kept his glass full. After the meal, we stopped by a tourist spot to listen to an Elvis impersonator and enjoyed a couple more drinks before heading back to the hotel. Nick was looking tired, but Vera poured him a large whiskey as we all sat around the table in our room. When Anders suggested another round of sunbathing and a card game for the next day, Vera happily agreed. The game went on with the same rules as before, and before long, Vera was the winner of 150 euros, but also ended up without her clothes. Then Anders proposed a little wager for an extra game. If Vera won, she'd get 100 euros, but if she lost, Anders would give her a special spa treatment by shaving her pubic hair. She won the first round, but lost the second. Before anything else, we gently helped Nick, who had dozed off, back to their room so he could get a good night's rest. In our room, Vera lay down on the bed, and Anders, always the showman, gave her a careful trim and then used his electric shaver to finish the job. She couldn't help but laugh at how odd the situation was. As the night went on, there was a lot of joking, laughter, and stories shared. Anders reassured everyone that everything that happened was meant to be in good fun and respectful. It was all a bit of harmless excitement among friends, and everyone seemed to enjoy the moment without taking anything too seriously. Later that night, Vera confided that it was one of the most unforgettable experiences she'd ever had, and she wished Nick could learn something from the whole adventure, maybe even how to be a little more adventurous himself. We all promised to look out for each other and keep the good times rolling. The next morning, the four of us headed back to the beach. The older German couple was already in our wind shelter, and they waved enthusiastically when they saw us coming. A few euros changed hands, and they left the spot as happy as ever. We settled in for another relaxing day, and, just like before, Nick and I took a walk to the water. I noticed Nick seemed a little uneasy that morning, and honestly, I was feeling guilty about what had happened with Vera while he was asleep in their room the night before. I couldn't help but wonder if Vera had let something slip to him. I decided to check in and asked, "How are you doing today? You look a little pale." He laughed it off at first, then admitted, "Yesterday was my own fault, no big deal. But there's something more serious going on with Vera. I'm sure you've noticed how she's always criticizing me. It's only gotten worse these past few years. Our marriage has hit a rough patch, and honestly, our intimacy just isn't there anymore. She's beautiful, but I don't know how much longer I can handle things the way they are." I felt a wave of relief. He clearly didn't know the details of last night, or if he did, it wasn't what was really bothering him. So I asked him straight up, "Are you uncomfortable with how open she's been here? With her joining in on the games and all that?" He shook his head. "No, honestly, it's been a bit of lighthearted fun and maybe, just maybe, Anders is helping her loosen up. You heard how he talked about saving that secretary's marriage. Think he could help Vera, too? Don't think I'm nuts, but I've been considering all kinds of ways to shake things up, and I'm starting to think she needs something dramatic to help her reconnect and change the way she treats me. Would you talk to Anders about this for me?" I nodded and said, "Shouldn't be a problem. Just take a walk with him once we're back at the shelter." Back at our wind shelter, it was pretty clear from Anders' grin that he'd already spent some private time with Vera and somehow managed to keep things discreet. Honestly, I was amazed at how far Vera had come. Just a few days ago, I doubt she ever would have dreamed of doing anything like this. But here she was, going along with all of it, and there was definitely more adventure in store. Later, Vera and I ended up alone, and she joined me on my lap for a bit, keeping things quick and careful in case anyone came near our shelter. No one did, and it seemed like just another playful episode in this wild vacation. That night after dinner, we all gathered in our room. Vera had already agreed to play along with another one of Anders' games. Anders had Vera and Nick stand together and then explain that Nick, as her husband, should take charge more often, especially since Vera's constant nagging had been tough for both of them. Anders handed Nick a little prop and encouraged him to play along, giving Vera a gentle but playful punishment for her behavior, which Nick did with more enthusiasm than expected. Afterwards, Anders guided Nick and Vera through some new ways to connect, encouraging them to be open and try things together that they hadn't before, like being more affectionate and adventurous. As Nick took a breather, I showed him a few simple ways to help Vera relax, like giving her a back rub or being gentle and attentive, things that helped them both feel closer. Then, with Anders' guidance, Nick and Vera explored new sides of their relationship, trying out things they'd never done as a couple before, always with laughter and lightness. After a little while, Vera suggested something fun and spontaneous.
She wrote 3 letters, A, P, and M, on slips of paper, put them in a bowl, and covered it with a towel.
Nick picked the first slip, Anders drew the second, and I ended up with the last one. What followed was probably the most energetic and memorable night any of us had experienced. There was plenty of laughter, some surprises, and, above all, a sense that both Vera and Nick had truly reconnected. It was clear that they both had a wonderful time and were discovering new things about each other, and that alone seemed to lift their spirits and bring them closer together. Afterwards, when Vera and Nick left our room and Anders and I were relaxing with a glass of whiskey, Anders turned to me and said, "Never forget what happened here. If you ever think something's impossible, remember that a determined man can achieve some pretty incredible things." He shared his favorite bit of advice: just remember OPA, observation, planning, and action. I spent that sightseeing trip figuring out what made Vera tick. After that, everything fell into place. And honestly, I think we did them both a huge favor. He went on, we helped Vera let go of her strict views and Nick to be more confident and take charge. I really like those two, and instead of feeling bad about what happened, I feel like I did some good. The next day, it was time for us to head home. Vera and Nick came by to see us off as the coach arrived to take us to the airport. Fabian wrapped up his story by telling me, "I've actually used what I learned from Anders in my business life, and I've managed to keep everything above board. You'll never guess who I married, someone you know from school." "Who?" I asked. PP. If I'd been on a barstool, I would have fallen off. PP's real name is Angelica. She was that rich, beautiful, spoiled, and slightly stuck-up girl we all remembered. Her nickname, Princess on the Pie, came from how she acted back in school. As luck would have it, I was sitting on a sofa, but I still ended up nearly choking on my drink when Fabian mentioned her. After a hard cough, I managed, "Did you really have to organize a wild party to help Angelica change her ways?" Fabian burst out laughing. "No, of course not. Angelica is an amazing wife and a wonderful mother to our daughter. We've got a cozy cottage on the West Coast, and I'd love for you and your family to visit us one weekend soon." "Sorry, I was just shocked," I told him. He smiled. "I get it. She knows everything about my past, and even her parents accept me now. Anders is still doing well with his business ventures, and I'm running one of the companies myself. It took me 6 months just to get Angelica to go on a date with me, but after that, everything just fell into place." I accepted his invitation and started to believe that maybe, just maybe, life still has a few miracles left for us all.